getting the first 3 records, and then I'm getting the next 3 records, and so on. And then upon getting something back successfully, I'm assuming it's going to be JSON, and result is the placeholder for the JSON, and I increment through result, and I build some HTML on the fly, and this is kind of dirty, but it allows you to see what's going on. And then I have a div with an ID tag called records, and I'm appending the HTML to records. And that's how the list grows. So what happens? This is the jQuery side. What happens in MVC when we go to this route? Here, the really interesting things are that I'm returning a rendered JSON, and I'm not inheriting from controller. I'm inheriting from base controller. There is a, this might seem strange. What am I doing here? There's a fairly common pattern, or I should say refactoring, in which, let's say you have an object called crow, and it inherits from an object called animal, and you create bird between them, so that then crow inherits from bird, and bird inherits from animal. I'm doing something comparable to that, which is how you typically extend a controller. I have made a new class called base controller, which inherits from controller, and then here my particular controller, AJAX controller, just inherits from base controller. And this allows me to extend a regular controller and allow it to do some things it can't normally do. In this case, it empowers this render JSON. And what that does is it allows us to return a JSON action result, which is again an invention. And what that looks like is this. Let's see. I've made a new. This is how you'd make an action result of your own, and I'm using Newtonsoft JSON. It's a library that allows you to cast objects to JSON, basically. So all I'm doing right here,
Kind of like the JavaScript serializer does?
Yeah.
Okay.
The rest of the code here is really not that interesting. I make an hibernate call, and I go get some records, and then I make an anonymous object to make it a little bit more presentation friendly. Instead of like this date is a date time value, and I pretty it up. The bool value, I make it a string that says true or false, that sort of thing. And that's it in a nutshell. Here's another something I rolled. I created a little. This little dummy app has sort of a DPS theme, where you could pick a driver by driver's license number, and it would show you the cars for the driver, and you could then turn around and reassign one of the cars to another driver, and it does it all without reposting the page. This is all driven through AJAX. And this code's a little bit of a bigger mess, and so I'm not going to dive into it, but it's another example of something you could do with AJAX. Let's see here. There's a snippet of the code. This shows off what is known as long polling. Here, this is what happens when one, back here, if I change one of these drop-downs to do a reassignment. The snippet of code that empowers that is this here. So here, we have an AJAX loop. I'm sorry, it's not a loop. We have an AJAX function, as we did, in the prior example, but it's got a few other parameters attached to it. We're doing an asynchronous call. We're waiting for 50 seconds before we time out. If we do not get a success, we have a failover for an error. In the event of an error, we try again to run the same function. This is what's known as long polling. Is when you fail to get what you want, you just try again, and we try again in 15 seconds. That's all there is to it. Long polling is a way to try to keep a connection open to the server. Just as AJAX was once kind of like jamming a square peg into a round hole, so too is what are known as real-time events. which are attempts to hold open a connection to the server. They're all a little bit painful and clunky. This is one way to skin the cat. It's pretty typical. It's called long polling. In terms of security,
back on that.
yeah,
Other one.
yeah.
When would it shut down? When would it say I'm done? I'm not going to try anymore.
It's going to keep running in a loop.
And they close the
Forever.
browser.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, or you leave the page. Yeah.
In other words, not recommended.
Well, I mean, until you get a success.
Well, it's not
I
recommended
don't
if
think-
you're going to be eating up that much traffic for an application here. Think
But
about
if you're
potentially-
staying on the same page, I'm
So they
user.
leave the browser open and they go home for the day, and it just requests all night. It wastes a lot of resources, in my opinion. If they're irresponsible, you're putting the responsibility on the user, the irresponsible party, in my opinion. You can't rely on the user to be responsible.
So you would what?
Put a counter against error every time error
When you
fires
get 10.
with a limit, so that it steps out and doesn't run the set timeout on a base count.
Would it time out on a session timeout?
No, because it's going to keep pinging the server. It's going to be keeping the session
The
alive.
timeout was
Ah,
That's the
you're
whole
right.
point.
session timeout.
That's the whole point of the long polling, is to keep the session alive, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. As far as security goes, well, it's really not a big deal so first of all, as you can imagine, if you have this in an app, you don't want it just exposed to everybody. You don't want other apps grabbing onto it and using it, probably. Other times there might be scenarios where you want a public-facing API. If it was just like built into like an app that's where only the same domain name is going to be using those routes, or only the app is going to be using its own routes, it's pretty easy to secure them. You could have the same authentication in the controller you would have otherwise for any other action, or any other controller. That part is not too tricky or painful. I guess here we could do Active Directory authentication. If you had something based on sessions where people, like a public-facing website where users logged in, you could, you just use the same authentication or the same security to keep outside parties from hitting a route that they shouldn't hit. If you want to expose a public-facing API, and this is the point where the presentation veers beyond things I've done into things I've just Googled. So we're going into the theory part now. If you want to expose a public-facing API, there is a way to do it. There's a way to create encrypted hashes and have both a client and the server aware of a key. That's one way to do it safely. This URL right here has a great article about how to do it. Again, I've not done it myself. There's something called OAuth, which is if you don't want to roll your own implementation of that, I think they've already solved the problem. Again, I haven't used it myself. And then continuing with things I've not done, but mostly just heard about and what's coming in the future. There's some game changers coming around Christmas time. We're going to get IIS 8 and Visual Studio 11 and MVC 4, which you can play with MVC 4 now and Visual Studio 11. They're both in beta, I guess. So you can download them and monkey with them. I believe the release is going to be around Christmas time, and that's my impression of the same thing for IIS 8 also. I mentioned there are something called real-time events, which is an attempt to keep a connection open at the server. And the one I spoke to was long polling. Let's talk through it. I saw Scott Hanselman give the keynote at a convention called the DallasData.net convention back in March. And he said there's 4 kinds of real-time events in his speech. He said there are server-side events, long polling, forever frame, and WebSockets. WebSockets is the futuristic-y thing. It is coming in IIS 8. It does not exist in 7. It creates a means to hold a connection open to the server. But let's go through each of these. Server-side events. This is like using Comet. It's a kind of reverse AJAX. Basically, the server is just going to push stuff to the client that the client can then consume. This is not two-way communication typically. It's more of a stock ticker could read stuff being pushed to it from the server, that sort of thing. There is a way called piggyback to try to get stuff back to the server, in which you'd collect something and you'd hang on to it until like the page posts or something, the page refreshes. And then when you have an opportunity to speak to the server, you tack on this metadata and carry it back to the server. Long polling, which we talked about, it's what we saw. We try to reach the server, and if we fail at some point, we try again. Forever frame is pretty interesting. You're going to have an iframe open on a page, and then with JavaScript, you would tell the iframe to load some content. The content it would load would be an HTML page that's mostly blank, save for some JavaScript functions nested within the HTML page. The JavaScript functions will all load progressively because that's just the way HTML works. And as you change around the iframe, you can go fish for other things. It's one way to pool in data. And then WebSockets. Coming in iOS 8, they allow for bidirectional communication channels between the client and the server. They can fail. I went to a lunch once where Jeremy Miller kind of vented about how they fail occasionally. That you have to have some sort of failover mechanism, be it long polling or something else, in order to really use WebSockets. You can't just rely on them.
So what kind of scalability can you get with WebSockets? I mean, it seems to me like you're really handing out a piece of your server to each client, aren't you?
Yeah, and I can't speak to it because I don't know anything about it. I just know it's coming. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how painful it's going to be to use or not. I've really only done the long polling.
Seems like it's trying to turn a web app into a client app.
Yep, that's exactly right. And from what I've read, and I'm very limited, but it is what we're going to be doing a lot of in the future.
Okay.
Says who?
Just the way they're talking, it's supposed to be like the next biggest thing. It's supposed to be great.
Okay.
Sounds like a mainframe to me.
Great for eating up resources, yeah.
Well, but it's two-way. You don't have to. There's no more worrying if what the state is. Not that we do with MVC, but it's just always there now.
Unless it fails.
Unless it fails.
Okay. At the same convention I went to in March, I was exposed to a JavaScript project called Single R. What it does is it tries to, it basically tries to manage your real-time events and take some of the pain away from them and abstract it away from you. And again, it's something I've not used myself. I've just heard about, and from an outside looking in, it kind of seems impressive. It will attempt to use WebSockets, and then when if something goes wrong, it falls back over to server-side events. And then when those become wonky, it uses either forever frame or long polling. So it has some baked-in failover so you won't have to think about it. You can just use Signal R to do your connections in theory. But that said, I've also not used it. And I think this is the last slide. There's something coming with MVC4 called ASP.NET Web API. And what it has done is it's sort of taken, you can see I had to roll my own custom implementation. This here's an MVC3 project. I had to roll some of my own custom implementation and extend the controller class and also create my own action result in order to get this to work. It has a lot of, it's basically got an implementation where like a lot of this work and thought has been done for you. You get, just as I created base controller, which is separate from controller in some sense, you get your own separate kinds of classes for controllers for AJAX. You can, one thing that's different is when you hit an AJAX route, you'll specify a verb. It can be any verb you like, and within the controller there'll be different actions for the different verbs. One for get, one for post, one for put, etc. And then when you get back an error message, you can do different things based on different error codes. The error code is a piece of metadata that will come back to you in their implementation. And that is about all I have.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Yeah.
There's always one. He claps.